Well, hello, Master Gardeners. My presentation for you today is what I did for a few new Master Gardeners that I met up with last Thursday, which was May 9th of 2019. So why don't we go ahead and jump? Spring is finally here. I am so excited. The sun is shining, at least today. Hopefully, when you watch this, the sun is still shining. But I really wanted to just go through this because there's a lot of information that going into especially your first year as being a master gardener, I'm sure some can feel overwhelmed. So I want to make sure I'm there for you. Okay, so I handed out certificates last May 9th. This was just a simply class completion. Probably should have gotten this to you back in December. But we haven't had a chance to really meet up in person, and so I wanted to make sure I had a chance to hand out certificates while people were there. If you didn't get yours yet, no worries. I will hand it to you when I see you. Otherwise, my plan is to mail out the ones if I don't end up running into at some point. You'll get your official Master Gardener certificates at the end of this year once you complete your 24 hours of volunteer service. Um, and we'll talk a little bit about what that'll look like in that online reporting system. So, kind of my agenda that I'm going to go through. Some of this I might go through pretty quickly. With recording in PowerPoint, I can't necessarily, jump around to different websites, things like that. But I will talk a little bit about what some of that online reporting looks like. I'm going to talk a little bit about what projects I will be uploading to the new online reporting website. And then maybe talk a little bit about, well, why do we do what we do? And then we'll dive a little bit more into kind of horticulture inquiries. So kind of a deep dive into that. I'll let you know where you can learn a little bit more about some of that process as you dive a little bit deeper into what it means to be a master gardener. And then we'll talk a little bit about the weekly horticulture updates from the state, how you can get involved with that, and we'll talk a little bit about when those are, what time, if you end up missing one, if you can go back and view them, that kind of a thing. And then you probably got an email from me today or in the next few days about what your best communication style is. This way I can communicate with master gardeners on a deeper level. So if people prefer phone calls, then I'll send you a phone call with saying, hey, I have this question, can you help me out with it, kind of a thing. Some people prefer text or email or even a general newsletter, so maybe that's something I'll develop. And then we'll talk a little bit about future meetings, especially for those newer master gardeners, a little bit about the next level 1 training and things like that. All right, moving on. So the online reporting system, you go to that website, it should be volunteers.wisconsinmastergardener.org. It should bring you to a secure login. If that website doesn't quite work, the website to get access to this is in previous volunteer vibes. So we can make sure that you have that ability to get access to it. So if you're not able to get in, please let me know and we'll work through some of those problems. I really like this system because it's going to help, me visualize what all of you are doing in a little bit more streamlined manner. It's going to be a little bit easier for you to keep track of your hours and kind of see what impact you have from year to year. Different things like that. And so it'll be a really good opportunity, I think, to move away from the paper pencil. Now, that doesn't mean I know there are people out there who love paper and pencil, and honestly, I love paper and pencil too. But sometimes, technology can be a little bit easier, a little bit more streamlined. So, my recommendation is if you like paper and pencil, keep all track of your records of your hours and things like that, and then we'll add those in as we go along. Sorry, let me step back a second. We'll add those all up at the end of the year. I'll have time set aside in my office hours for you to come in and we can input those into the computer. So if you have a little bit of a harder time with the technology, please let me know and I'll help you through that process. All right, so projects. So these are the ones that I'm going to be uploading this year. We have Riverside International Friendship Gardens, Myrick Park Native Gardens, Kane Street Gardens, Community Gardens. Now this is kind of a catch-all for any other ones besides Kane, so maybe it's Washburn, or I know there's several other community gardens, but I'm drawing a blank right now. Various school gardens. I know some people help out in, Galesville, um, different things like that, to be in touch. And then we have the county fair, so we'll be opening up the booth this year for extension for Master Gardeners to come down and answer a few questions. I will have some resources for you to hand out if you'd like to. And that leads me to the horticulture helpline. So if maybe it's a little bit harder for you to do some of the things like planting or watering or weeding, in the various different gardens, maybe you can come in and help me then with the horticulture helpline, and then association meetings. For those count for those that are involved with kind of that association level and the leadership. So if you're on the board or assist the board with their meetings, then that's where they can count their hours. Please let me know if there's anything else that should be added. So just kind of some things to think about as we're going through, our projects and uploading them, which I'll be uploading them, but as you're reporting them, a few questions I want you to kind of think. I'm not going to read all of these off to you. Kind of the three major ones I want you to kind of think of is whose audience we're trying to reach with our project. Is it youth? Is it adults? Is it maybe adults with disabilities or youth with disabilities? Is it the community? And what is the goal of the project? Is it, beautification? Is it education? Is it, teaching people that, these native plants, they're going to help kind of preserve your soil, and they're also going to bring back some of those pollinators. And it can be, I'm sure it can be a little daunting being a master gardener. And I just want you to know that, yes, I want you to be thinking about these questions, but, you don't have to be the genius behind everything. You can, have your freedom to still do the stuff that you love. I guess the biggest thing I'd like you to kind of think about is, what type of impact will the project have? What impact will it have on the community? Will it help to bring pollinators back that maybe we haven't seen in a number of years? Will it help us to connect to other countries and cities and see what kind of plants that they grow and how those relate to us? Is it helping to feed the hungry? Donating so many X amount of produce each year. It's those different things that we need to think of. Well, what is the impact of our project? And, I have it a little bit up, but I know I said I wasn't going to read it. But, how can we best use our time and talents? That's what I would love for you is to, use your time and your talents to to the best of your ability, so that way you feel like you're making a contribution. Whether it is just helping out with some paperwork in the office or maybe it's updating a website, things like that. Those are all important pieces of our projects as well. So I don't want to I don't want you to feel like even if you're not quite out in the field, you're still assisting, even if you're in the office and things like that. So a little bit about horticulture inquiries. I did want to deep dive a little bit into things. I'm trying to go through this rather quickly because I don't want you to have to sit for like a 20-minute video. But with horticulture inquiries and the deep dive, it's that chance to look at how we approach our questions, or when people ask us questions, maybe we don't have our resources on hand. How do we handle those different situations? So sometimes finding the answer to a question, it can be very simple or it can be very complex. Sometimes a person may call into the office or stop you on the street if they know you're a master gardener, say you have your badge on. And they might have a very simple question like, how do I get rid of crabgrass organically? Then you can tell them it's hand pulling. um, or might have a more complex question like, I got a phone call the other day about lawn renovation. They were just asking for interpretation of their soil test. But as soon as we talked about their soil test, we talked about what could be some other issues of why their lawn wasn't getting established. What are things, when is the right time to seed their yard? What are things that they can do to improve so they can have a yard again, so it's not just a whole bunch of soil. Um, and it's okay to say, I'm not sure at the moment. Let me do some research and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. I mean, sometimes we aren't going to know, and sometimes we might have to rely on our specialists. So we have various specialists in, Madison that assist us with, our various problems. We have weed identification, disease, and insects. So if you're not sure, feel free to reach out to me with the question and we can get a hold of the specialist and hopefully one of them knows. But every once in a while we can get a big mystery. Now, with my position, I do get, sometimes emails from other counties because I'm the main horticulture contact for the 5-county area that I'm in. So, for example, this picture came from a client. They're wondering, well, what is this odd looking plant and is it invasive? Turns out this is mayapple. It's not invasive. It's a native plant, but it can almost act as a little invasive and looks a little funny. So if you're not sure what it is and you move into an area, it can be a little alarming. So for me, that was a fairly simple question, but they're not always that cut and dry. Um, so deeper dive. So what question should you ask? When you come into the office, I'll provide you a handout that goes through some of those questions. Should you run into some of those issues on how to ask those questions, because sometimes it can be a little difficult to determine what they're actually looking for. So it's almost like a script. So when you come in, you can kind of look through almost like a dictomas key where you can figure out what type of tree you're looking at or what type of plant. So it's like, if you have a tree, go down towards the bottom and here's the question you ask. If it's a plant and it's a disease issue, here's the questions you can ask. If it's an insect, here's some questions you can ask. It's just going to walk you through that process because I know sometimes, especially when I first started into extension, it was just like, well, am I asking the right questions? Because sometimes I felt like I didn't get enough information and it was just that I wasn't asking enough questions. So sometimes that can be a little bit scary. But I think what we'll do then is we'll kind of move on here from this deeper dive. I'll probably put out another video. Otherwise, the state horticulture extension had 3 programs that they put on throughout the state about horticulture inquiry. And right now they're in the process of editing those and kind of picking the very best videos, and then they'll post those somewhere where they'll be available for master gardeners and extension educators to view. So that way, even if you weren't able to get it to any of those 3, kind of horticulture inquiry days, then you're still able to get that information because it's really great information that we think all our master gardeners should have. And sometimes, like I said, if somebody brings something in, you might need another sample, and it's okay to ask them for another sample. I don't think anybody's going to get too mad at you. I've had to tell somebody who pretty much brought me in a stick that, hey, I need something that has maybe some leaves on it for me to identify. So, I mean, most people aren't going to get upset if you keep questioning them, but just, make sure it's in a conversational tone. But I think that's all I'm going to say for now on this deeper dive. I can do something later on that'll talk a little bit more about it in a separate video. This is just kind of a quick case study. So a person walks into the office with a branch from a tree. You notice there seems to be a black substance that's encasing the tree branch. What follow-up questions would you ask in order to determine what it was? Well, my first question would be, well, what type of tree it is. In this case, it was a plum tree. I asked, how long that they noticed. They're like, well, I just noticed kind of these darker spots this year. And it seems to be on several branches, and there's other plum and cherry trees in the area. A few of the other ones seem to be a little bit affected, but not nearly as badly as this one. Uh, and then, it's got a very unique look to it, almost looks like black soot. You can see in the photo here to your left, if you're viewing this, that, it's pretty much encasing that branch. Unfortunately, what the name of this disease is black knot, and it can be very detrimental to the tree, so it can choke off branches. And the solution I would give then is that if it wasn't overtaking the plum tree, to prune out below at least 3/4 of an inch, if not more, below where the fungus is at. And then between each trim or prune, you're going to want to dip your shears or pruners into like a bleach like solution so you can sanitize, so you're not spreading that fungus to other parts of the trees as you're pruning it out. At this point, if the plum tree was pretty much full, then I would just at that point suggest getting rid of the tree. Uh, there's a lot of different things that, that's probably one of the hardest, especially if a tree is very important or a plant's very important to someone, is telling them, well, maybe they'll have to get rid of it, but sometimes that might be the only solution left. Okay, so we have a weekly horticulture update. So in these updates, the format usually goes as a county roundup. Now, you wouldn't be responsible for this. You probably would hear me chime in about, what I'm seeing. But if you have things that you're seeing that maybe I'm missing, feel free to let me know before the Friday, and I can let people know on the county roundup. Then there'll be a plant disease update from Brian Huddleston, and then an insect update from PJ Leash. And then some specialist or county educator will be presenting on a different topic each Friday. Last Friday was Kristen Krakowski. She did on the produce safety regulations and kind of what that new produce safety rule looks like and what that means for our like farmers markets and things like that, and our commercial growers, so to speak. So there's two ways you can do it. From the comfort of your own home. You should have been sent out connection information from the state, and you should be able to connect via phone or laptop as long as you have that link, and you log in between 9:30 and 10:30. The only thing that we ask is, with Master Gardeners, that we stay muted, video off, because that's going to give you the best connection, and it'll prevent any feedback. If you're a little curious on how the technology works, I would recommend logging in a few minutes earlier just to make sure that, your technology is working the way that it should. Otherwise, if you're not very comfortable with that, you can always come into the extension office on Fridays from 9:30 to 10:30, and we can view it then as a group. I'll let you know ahead of time when I'm unavailable. So this Friday, which is going to be the 17th, I will be available, so if you'd like to come in then, feel free. So then, communication in future meetings. You probably got an email from me today, which it's like May 13th, and it included a link to a survey, so I can get a better understanding of how each of you likes to communicate, because everybody communicates in a very different way. So whether it's text messages, email, phone calls, newsletters, websites, or other, there'll be an option to select multiple ways of receiving information. It just helps me determine how best to advertise when opportunities for new projects become available, or how to request assistance from Master Gardeners. On that survey, you'll also have noticed that there'll be an area of what area of horticulture are you most comfortable with. This is your time to say, well, I prefer, maybe working in the office, or I do really well with flowers, or trees are kind of more my specialty. And then I included one more question of if you'd be willing to help out with level 1 training. I'm trying to get as many master gardeners involved with that because I feel like the more you're involved, the more you get to interact with the new master gardeners. So as always, feel free to let me know if there's any questions associated with that. So for as far as, final thoughts, like I said, I kind of set up this meeting for new master gardeners, but I'll probably send this video out to all my master gardeners if they're interested in watching. But if there was another future meeting of the 2018 Master Gardener Group, if they want to meet up, as I said, well, I maybe didn't say this because this is probably like my second or third time recording, with my Bluff Country Master Gardeners. They meet on Mondays, the first Monday of the month, and they really have good topics and great speakers that they invite. So I encourage you, if you have the time, it's usually meeting about 7 o'clock. Now, if they go on a trip like they did this past month, they might meet earlier so that way you can go to the location. Um, and as always, if you have any questions, feel free to get a hold of me. I look forward to, working with all of you more in the future, and goodbye.